Hello everyone. So today I would like to discuss a phenomenon that seems to be very common among NP types, which means that this is a type that values and uses extroverted intuition as their top perceiving function. That would be INFP, INTP, ENFP, and ENTP. So I'm kind of afraid to make this video because I'm not trying to bash anyone or call them stupid or say that just because you are this type means that you do this. I'm kind of speaking from my experience and as an NI user, and I guess I would just like to say that I have observed very frequently since I have engaged in conversations with people about personality type or even not about personality type. I've realized very frequently that NPs will use straw man arguments or use the straw man fallacy against me time and time again. And the reason why I want to explain this in a video is because I don't necessarily think that NPs do this on purpose, or maybe they don't even know that they do this. And I think that it is directly correlated to NI and NE. This is not just me getting my frustration out against one or two people. Like, this is how NE works, which is different from how NI works. And as far as functions go, too much of one function or too much of a good thing can be a bad thing. That's sort of my philosophy, is that everyone, no matter what personality type you are, if you lean so heavily on your top function and you haven't sort of begun the self-actualization process or tried to achieve some sort of balance, then there's gonna be some parts of your perception that are off balance. And so this is just one that I've noticed. Okay, that's long enough disclaimer. As you can see, I'm trying really hard to prevent any straw man arguments in the comments. But okay, what I would like to share is, for those of you who don't know what a straw man argument is, it pretty much is just the idea that if I, Meghan LeVota, and ENFJ were to make a proposition or share my opinion or make an argument or say something, and then if you, listening to this, were to then make a counter argument to me, but if all of your premises and everything you say don't have anything to do with what I said, and you are attacking something that you think I said, that is pretty much a straw man argument. You are attacking. It's like I make an argument, and then the person that tries to do a counter argument to me is attacking a completely different argument that has nothing to do with what I said. So, the way that NE works is that NE is about possibilities. You all know that. But NE has a hard time differentiating between this possibility is more probable than this possibility. This is a good possibility. This is a bad possibility. They keep their minds open. Where NI, on the other hand, I see all these possibilities and I feel the need to organize them. I see all this and I see it as noise, and I want to find the signal in the noise. And everything that I say, I'm all about hitting the nail on the head. And I feel like NE does not hit the nail on the head. They hit the nail more times around a general cluster of something. And that's just sort of how it works. Not one is better than the other. I'm not trying to say that NI is better than NE, but the way it works is that NE, when you say something, that NE is not narrowing in on your point. NE is thinking about all of the possibilities of how what you said could have been interpreted to other people based on their past experience or based on their worldview, based on their emotions at the time. NE can hear what you said and think, oh, she could have meant this, she could have meant that, she could have meant this. And NE can notice all of the connotations to what you said. And this can make high stack NE users get a little bit confused in general by people in life But they thrive in that chaos, so it doesn't really matter, because NE users don't care nearly as much at trying to, hit the nail on the head and understand deeply, like this sort of one way, because NE doesn't want there to be just one way. NE wants to live in that realm full of multiple interpretations of one thing. So, because NE views things that way, what happens is I will say one thing that will remind the NE user of an entire cluster of things that, in my opinion, have absolutely nothing to do with what I was talking about. And it could be quite insulting to my NI, who I've spent the time trying to narrow down my idea. And so to see an NE user then re-broaden my idea whenever I intentionally said what I said, I intentionally narrowed that down. And then to watch someone re-broaden what I said and then attack the outskirts of my point, it's kind of gaslighty, and it's not cool. It's not cool at all, because you're attacking me for something on the outskirts of the cluster of my point, whenever I just spent the time to narrow my point down and cut the fat out of my point. Does that make sense? Let me know if it does. Let me know if it doesn't. NI is about organizing ideas in the brain, organizing patterns. You might have heard this before, but if you think of it as a tree, there's NI would be like taking everything down to the root. And NE would be like sprouting something and creating all these different branches. So whenever I have taken the time to find the root of my point, or the root of my argument, or the root of my idea, to see somebody try and sprout more branches is very aggravating to me. Now, in my opinion, there is a time and a place for people to sprout these new ideas. And don't get me wrong, like, some of the best people in my life have been NPs and are NPs. I tend to be the sort of person that surrounds myself with NPs, because whenever I get stuck in my head, I need people to branch out for me, help me branch out. And NE is very skilled at helping people get their head outside of the box. But because NE is so used to getting people outside of the box, I think they mistake my hard work narrowing down into a point and trying to hit the nail on the head. They mistake that as me trying to stay in the box, when that's not what I'm doing. And so when I've gotten into many arguments, especially with NTPs, and I'm not saying that NTPs do this more than NFPs, but I think that NTPs are more prone to argue for the sake of arguing. This isn't because NTPs are jerks. This is just because with lower down feeling, it's easy for NTPs to get lost in doing things that don't really matter to them, where NFPs will only argue if something truly matters to them, because they're going to be aware of their emotions at the time, where NTPs can just sort of get caught in a conversation or caught arguing about something that they really don't care about, because it's just something their TI latches onto. But yeah, especially with NTPs, and I've made another video before about something about NE users that annoy me in arguments. And one of those things would be the fact that a lot of times people will accuse me of lying whenever they go back and say, oh, but you said this before. And I don't know if they realize how often NI is evolving. And also, just because I said something before doesn't mean it counteracts what I said now. Like, I feel like I hold a lot of opinions together that other people might think is hypocritical or something, when I am like intentionally holding them together. And so that's what can be hard when arguing with an NE user, and I'm not saying all NE users are like this, because I think that an NE user that cares to understand the other person's perspective, that is either using their FI to truly care about you or using their TI to really try and get it right, they aren't going to be doing straw man arguments, because they're going to be, trying to really refine whatever they think or feel. But there are so many straw man arguments that happen from NE users just being honestly too lazy to really interpret my idea. Because NI is deep. And I'm not saying NPs are the laziest type. Sorry, I keep using these disclaimers because I can pretty much feel the way that you NPs could get me wrong. So I'm trying to prevent that. But it's like FE could be lazy when it comes to not understanding the FI. TE could be lazy when it comes to not truly understanding the TI. SE could be lazy and not really using the SI. Like, for example, FE might brush over feelings that FI wants to feel. TE might not think long enough before they start talking. SE might think, oh, whatever, I don't need a helmet when they're riding a bike or something. And neglect SI. Like, every extroverted function does this to the introverted function. And like, as an extrovert, I know that I do this with FE. And so this video is just about NE and NI. Sorry, I feel like I'm being a little defensive, but also like, I am so annoyed with straw man arguments because it is a slap in the face to NI. It's a slap in the face to all the time that NI users take trying to narrow and refine their vision. And it's lazy and it's rude, and I don't know, I feel like sometimes NPs think that I'm lying whenever I say, no, you're wrong, that's not what I said. I don't know if they think that I'm being defensive because I'm an FE dominant and I get emotional, but I'm not emotional because you were right about my point. I'm emotional because you are misinterpreting me and you are lazy and you aren't seeing what's going on. That's really what grinds my gears, is when NE just sort of wants to soak up the main idea as quickly as possible so that they can move on to another idea. This is why NE users are so open-minded. There's nothing wrong with that. There's a lot right with that, but it can be wrong whenever you are trying to interpret the NI idea. NI is the least common function. And so NI users, NJs are the most rare type. That doesn't mean we're better. And it's really annoying whenever NJs try and position themselves like they're better. And I think it's because NJs have lived their whole life feeling misunderstood by most people, that a lot of them, when they discover personality type, they're like, you know what? Fuck this. Like, I'm rare. Like, I'm amazing. Whatever they need to do to make themselves feel better. Well, the world would not go on if it was just all of us NJs crafting a vision, because there would be no one to give us the possibilities, no one to do the work, and no one to keep us safe. Like, so there's a reason why there are less NJs, but it's just a slap in the face to the work that NI does, and it's a slap in the face to all of the thought that has been done refining an idea. So, I mean, with me, when I'm, as an NI user, I don't want to say or do anything unless I'm hitting the nail on the head, and unless I am grasping the main idea. In fact, I can't do anything unless I'm grasping the main idea. It's really interesting. I'm in this psychology class now, and I can tell like the difference between whoever's writing the articles that I have to read for class. Some of them will take me literally hours to read because there's no main idea or there's no clear main idea. And then the other ones with the main idea, I just breeze past and I like grasp everything. Like, if there's no main idea, I really don't know how to function. And so this isn't, you might think that's a great thing, but it's really, really hard because most of the world doesn't give a shit about the main idea. They don't care about seeing reality to such a deep level. Now, both NI and SI are deep ways of looking at reality, but NI is a deep intuitive level. SI is a deep sensory level. And deep sensory level is not less deep than a deep intuitive level. This is another thing I see all the time, people typing SJs or NPs that are deep people as NJs when they're not. They're being deep in an SI way. To be deep in an SI way would be really learning from the past in a very deep way, understanding why human beings act the way they do through experience and through observing your own body and through observing your own self. NI doesn't need those physical experiences to see deeply. Anyway, the purpose of this video is about NE users and strawman arguments. I guess this is just a PSA, like, don't do it. Like, it makes me upset. It's hurtful. It's lazy and it's idiotic. And part of me wants to say, oh, you look like an idiot, so it doesn't matter. But the world is full of so many NPs that can't tell the difference because they're all being lazy about their perception. I'm trying my best to, like, share my opinion without sounding mean. And I'm afraid of people strawmanning me in this video, missing my point. I always welcome constructive criticism whenever it's directed at my point, but whenever you're too lazy to even take the time to see what my point is, that's really frustrating for me. But I don't really know what else to do besides just saying my point over and over, because I can't force you to see the point. I can only inspire you to improve your NI wherever it may be in your stack and inspire you to want to look at things deeper. The best thing I can tell you NPs watching this is not to stop being NPs, but to realize what your brain is doing. You're trying to grasp as many ideas as possible. And so, as I know it's easier for you to clump ideas together, to sort of categorize them in your brain, but it's more polite and more useful for you if you can, at least when you're engaging with a person, take a moment to pause and keep your mind even more open. And you might think, oh, but my mind is open. Well, it's really like your SI that is being closed-minded at this. I believe it's like when people are arguing and using strawman arguments, it's like they're so certain that my argument was what they think it is because every other time they've heard an argument, it's been that as well. That's like you using SI to assume that every time you hear a similar argument, that it's like this same cluster of ideas. Whenever every NI user that you talk to has taken the time to refine, so there is no cluster. We're just saying one idea. We're just saying what our NI sees. And so you cannot make any assumptions when talking to an NJ about what else they believe. You only know what they said. With other NPs, maybe you can make an assumption. I don't know. Like, I personally don't like making assumptions, but every type does it in their own way. But what I will always stress is that you cannot make the same assumptions that you do with your functions when referring to another person. Like, for example, TE and FI users might assume that I'm using FI in certain times when I'm not. Or I might assume that an NFP, like, I might assume that they don't care about me if they aren't using FE to show it. Like, we all can get caught up when using assumptions that work for our type and then applying them to others. And I guess this video is just to show you that if you're an NP and you're listening to an NJ, try and grasp their point, because you probably don't know it. You're probably just throwing at them a mix of ideas you've heard before or a cluster that sounds right. You're just grasping the surface of their idea. NPs create more ideas, but in my opinion, they don't create the best ones. FE shows love more often, but FI, when it does decide to show love, shows it much deeper. Just the nature of introverted functions. And that doesn't mean introverts are better than extroverts, because if you don't, extroverted functions get the job done more. So your NE, if you're watching this, has learned that it's easier to grasp points when you make all of these assumptions and when you find patterns in your brain. But you're gonna really piss an NI user off who is trying their best to go against the current and find their signal in the noise and refine deeper in. And yeah, if you're an NP, you probably have no idea what I'm talking about, honestly, ever, unless you've taken the time to really think about it. So, or at least challenge your assumptions. Challenge what, your NE, everyone, no matter what you are. This video is directed specifically at NPs, but no matter what type you are, you have an extroverted function that is constantly making assumptions and making leaps. And just challenge that. Just try and take a second to pause and think about that before you act on that assumption, or at least recognize when your NE is going off, at least recognize that it is an assumption, because you all also don't use extroverted sensing. And so it's really hard to know what is an assumption and what is reality, because you guys are kind of disconnected from reality. I mean, us as NJs, I'm disconnected from my own body, my own human experience. I literally feel like I'm just a puppet making this thing do things. I don't know, if I'm cold, if I'm hot, I really, I'm disconnected from the human experience. So that's not great either. But NPs, they are disconnected from the reality that we all see, the shared reality, 3D reality that we see. NPs mostly just see a reflection of their own past experiences over and over again. That's why, so many miscommunications happen in this world, is because we see things so differently. And that's why I make these videos, and that's why I want to help people understand who they are and understand how to see other people better and understand that not everyone thinks like you. And so you can't just keep making assumptions that other people think like you, because that's why, that's why there's so much war going on, is because NE and NI, they couldn't be more different. SE and SI couldn't be more different. FE and FI, TE and TI. These things are just forces of nature that are different. And they kind of cause us to bump heads just naturally, just based on the assumptions that we make about each other. And it's only when we understand where that other person's coming from that we can stop this from happening. So yeah, NPs, don't make straw man arguments against to your NJ friends, and don't tone police your NFJs that are trying to tell you that you're wrong and you think that they're just being defensive and sad and whiny, when NFJs, we may be emotional and we might not have thought about what you thought about as long with TI or FI, but our NI is at least hitting the nail on the head of something. And so we aren't going to argue with you unless you're wrong. I'm not even going to, also, I don't understand why other people think that they know where I'm coming from more than I know where I'm coming from. I might be wrong about the solution or about the reality or about the problem, but you can't tell me that I'm wrong about what I said. That makes no sense to me. You can disagree with what I said, but if you start arguing against a premise that I don't hold, then you're wrong, okay? You're just wrong. Maybe that premise is important, and maybe you're right, but it's so annoying when it's yes, you're right, I agree with that. Where is that coming from? Where is that coming from? It's coming from NE making an assumption, thinking that NI works the same as it does, and it doesn't. So Anyway, thank you for watching this video. If you'd like to join my Facebook group, I have that linked below. I have one-on-one coaching, and I also have for $25 a week if you just want to send me voice messages back and forth and talk about your type and things like that. I have that as a service as well that is now below. Thank you for watching.